The truth hurts, doesn't it? Oh, sure. Maybe not as much as jumping on a bicycle with a seat missing, but it hurts.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, do you have any idea of just how we're just sort of like paddling along in the ocean, but we're in this incredible ocean that has all these incredible waves and this incredible creatures and this incredible timeline that we're in, and we're just sort of, just slip sliding away in the water, and we don't even really know what we're doing. You know what I'm saying?
Today's Tuesday as Existentialism is brought to you by Brad Hildebrand Nietzsche, the famous philosopher from Germany by way of Spanish Lake.
Think about it.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for underscoring the fact we're simply amoebas on God's fingernail here.
Well, every single day, there's more interesting stuff that happens on the national scene, mainly the national scene. The local scene gets a little bit interesting, but crazy, crazy, crazy times. Okay. Before I forget, I get forgetful of stuff like that. I have my little list of stuff like this. I want to throw out two things right from the get-go that I want you to pick up, and we'll go right into your top three. But
I got my pen, Brad. I'm ready. I'm writing it down.
Number one is Will Scharf. Number two is Romper. Okay?
Oh, God. Are you talking about those things that women wear that it's impossible if you're coming up behind them in the kitchen? Your hands have nowhere to go? Like, how are you supposed to move a romper to the side, Brad?
We'll talk about that later. Okay, John Combest, that's him, Combest. I mention it because of the fact that you need to type in JOHNCOMBEST.com into your browser, your phone, whatever you do. You will find this site not flashy, not lots of graphics, not lots of, glitz and stuff like that. It's a bare-bones site done that way on purpose, so it loads very quickly, of what he thinks are the, sometimes 20, 30, 40 different top stories in the state of Missouri. We start the show off in the morning by bringing in this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do?
Now on with the countdown.
Does the countdown for John, and we start off with...
In third place...
The midweek update came early yesterday, Brad. Straight out of Jefferson City. Scott Fawn's midweek update came on Monday this week, and the featured guest was a gentleman who is the strategist for Jay Ashcroft's governor campaign, a guy named Jason Cable Rowe. Now, Brad, this is a good time for a mea culpa here, because I have been on this show mispronouncing the name of Jay's strategist, Jason Cable Rowe. I've been calling him Jason Cabell Rowe, like former Astros infielder Enos Cabell, and my apologies for that. It's a good time to point out that yesterday I mispronounced Angela Mosley's name. I called her Angela Mosby. I don't know what that's about.
She called up.
I corrected that in the comments. So.
She was not
happy. Anyway,
happy.
Brad, as a guy that went through puberty with a last name that looks like Cumbest, I'm a bit sensitive to people mispronouncing last names. So the gentleman's full name is Jason Cable Rowe. He was on Scott's show, and he was talking about the state of play in the governor's race, Brad. Are you ready for my favorite quote from the interview? You ready for this?
Bill Eigel is going to win the governorship?
You are close. Now, he didn't predict that Bill Eigel would win, but he described Bill Eigel in the context of where Eigel stands in this race. He called Bill Eigel a, quote, irritant, unquote.
No, why?
So, Brad, you're fond of pointing out the proposition, what is it? 35, 53, what do they have in California?
Which one? Which one you're talking about?
The label that you have to put on everything in California.
Oh, yeah, no, Proposition 65. Prop 65.
65,
yeah,
that's
65.
what it is.
Yeah.
For things that cause cancer. It seems that the Ashcroft campaign considers Eigel like in that type of Prop 65 label, more of an irritant. And the idea is, privately or publicly, I should say, I think the Kehoe and Ashcroft people are dismissing Eigel. I think privately they would tell you that he's pulling some votes away from Jay Ashcroft, the more than Eigel spends. But it's a great interview. I got to say, this Jason Cable Rowe guy comes off as quite reasonable, personable. Scott Fawn seems to like him for what that's worth, which I think means a lot. And it's worth watching. I have timestamps up today on my website. And it's we've heard plenty from Bill Eigel And we've seen plenty of ads from Kehoe, and we haven't heard a whole lot, I think, from folks inside of Jay's campaign. So it's a good look inside Jay's campaign.
Interesting. Bill Eigel, I have to give him credit. The ads he's doing right now, they are disrupting a disruptor kind of ads because of the fact that they're not traditional. I was born here and I worked in, I went to the Air Force and I saw my calling for politics. I mean, we're here. I got the quote. Let me play this one. Okay. I'll do it here. I got it right here. I pulled this one off his ad. You sent me this. This is pretty funny. Okay, here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
Washington calls us backwards. They look down on us. Well, Washington can get bent.
Now, who else would say that in an ad?
It's really good. And I mean, when we talk about cutting through the clutter, you're right. It's not a guy just standing in front of an American flag. Like any kind of the Weekend at Bernie stuff he did after the debate that they had, they had given a lot of thought to, I think, what they were going to do after the debate. It's just really good. And again, when you're in that position, Brad, you're an underdog guy. You're a guerrilla fighter type of guy, and the web stuff that he puts together is so good. In fact, Brad, when we're talking about Eigel's campaign, that leads nicely into story number 2.
Wow, that must be a cue for
up a notch to number 2.
A lot of people are going to be taking this week off, Brad. Everybody kind of mails it in on July 4th week. Scott Fawn pointed out that anytime the Independence Day celebration, July 4th, falls between a Tuesday and a Thursday, most people just consider the week to be shot. But who's going to be putting together some work this week, Brad? I'll give you a hint. It's not the Eigel team or the Ashcroft team or the Kehoe team, but it's some group of politicos. This is a hard one. Take a wild guess who's got to be doing a lot of work before a deadline on Friday.
Valentina Gomez?
Exactly right. She's going to be rooting out weakness and gayness, Brad. And she's going to be doing it all while wearing a flak jacket that she bought at Uncle Sam's military depository.
No, seriously,
in St. Charles County.
I got that right.
Brad, here's who's going to be working.
Okay.
The Missouri Republican Party. Have you seen any headlines about the controversy about the state convention and the national convention?
Well, John, I should have mentioned this yesterday, but I had an interesting meeting on Sunday afternoon, which was very eye-opening to me. And there's all sorts of craziness going on with the Missouri Republican Committee on local levels and on the whole state levels. Would you agree with that or what?
Yeah, I would say, and I think the coup to put you at the top of the state party was unsurprising, but I think it was much needed, Brad. You're not the hero that we wanted, but you're the hero that we deserve, I think.
You think?
Well, I don't know. That's probably up for debate. Let's get into this story, though, Brad. We know that on May 4th, there was a Republican state convention, and a group widely considered to be anti-establishment ran against a group that some people, I think, would consider to be traditional, maybe quote-unquote establishment Republicans. And at what's being disputed here, at issue here, is what happened to that paperwork. Did the group that got elected not prepare their paperwork correctly? Did they have errors in it? Or did the Missouri Republican Party botch its job in submitting this paperwork to the Republican National Committee? And to be clear, what's at stake here is who are the delegates that will be going to Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention? Now, I have a quote here, Brad, from Sophie Shore, who happens to be the campaign manager for Bill Eigel, who ended up leading the state convention and whose delegates were elected, many of whom her delegates, I guess you could call them her delegates or her slate's delegates, were elected to the national convention. Here's the quote from Sophie Shore. The Missouri GOP, whether it be nefarious intentions or just incompetency, completely botched their one job, credentialing. It is asinine that the contest committee would accept a challenge that was orchestrated by the Missouri GOP on the basis of their own error and then reward them for their incompetence. So the bottom line is, Brad, the Missouri Republican Party has to pick a slate of candidates to go to the national convention to represent Missouri. Will they keep the so-called truly grassroots for Trump, I think is their name, for delegates to the national convention, or will they replace those delegates with folks of their own choosing? And we'll find out for certain by Friday.
Okay, can I pose a political question to you, John?
Absolutely. Please do.
The expert in this. I'm a guy who's sort of involved in this, but I'm not. I'm a guy who's, standing in the stands, but by the same token, every once in a while I run down onto the field and I say to coach, hey, coach, here's what you should be doing. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's my idea on this. This infighting in the Republican committee in the state of Missouri, and you see it locally in some of the, different counties and things like that, don't you think somebody should grab everybody, and get, just put them in a room and say, okay, if there was ever a time when the Democratic Party is in disarray, it's right now, especially after last Thursday, okay? Let's just all work together to create a united front and let the Democrats all go crazy nutbag like they're going, right? Get what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
I do. After we solve that, we'll head over to the Middle East and we'll get the Jews and the Palestinians together and we'll make Gaza one joyous trip. We all agree on a higher power, Brad, whether it be Allah or whether it be our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I think we could probably solve the Middle East crisis as easily as we could fight the fishers in the Missouri Republican Party.
Man,
There's simply too much money at stake, Brad. Every consultant is representing a faction. Every campaign group is representing a faction or a candidate or a movement. There's a lot of money to be made. And if consultant group X picks up one statewide victory and a little more campaign money, that takes food out of the mouth of consultant Y and their group of, quote, grassroots supporters. So, Brad, your intentions are beautiful and remarkably naive.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. Let's move on to number one.
The number one.
Presidential immunity. You knew we were going to talk about it, Brad, and credit to you for teasing at the end of C Block yesterday the fact that we would be talking about presidential immunity today. So I think most of us saw the ruling come through, or at least we saw the headlines about the president and a 6-3 ruling being granted some amount of immunity for decisions and actions that he takes as president. And boy, oh boy, is the quote-unquote media big mad. The Kansas City Star has a piece up today, Brad, which is great. First of all, the KC Star Boys, which is a unique triumvirate of reporters, have a story about Will Scharf's role in the case. But the KC Star editorial board, which is a different group, says that support for Trump will be, quote, a black mark on the careers of Andrew Bailey and Will Scharf, Brad, by supporting Donald Trump and the fact that he wants to be king. That's the word they use. The Supreme Court is saying it's okay for Donald Trump to be a king. It's going to be a black mark on the careers of Andrew Bailey, who's a known fishing scofflaw, and Will Scharf, who once attended a Princeton social supper club where a guy had a beer poured over him, by the way. Anyway, a black mark on those guys' careers. I'm surprised we could still say black. Maybe we should say a BIPOC mark on their careers, Brad.
Okay, so what they're saying is either of the two attorney general candidates are essentially tainted by this whole thing?
They are tainted, Brad. They're that area between, and the anus. They are a taint on Missouri, Brad. We could call them the perenniums of Missouri.
But, okay, John, let's dive in this a little bit deeper, okay? Here's what I find fascinating about this whole thing. Okay, this whole thing comes out from the Supreme Court yesterday, okay? How did this happen? Why was this an issue? Do you know the answer to that question?
I don't know.
The answer to that question is because the Democrats were trying to use their lawfare to throw Trump in jail. So essentially what has happened is this Supreme Court ruling would have never come around if it weren't for the fact that Jack Smith goes after Trump on the Jan 6th, and they go after him on the documents in Mar-a-Lago, and Fannie Willis and her boyfriend go after them in Atlanta, and 2 times in New York, once with what's her name, E. Jean Carroll, and the other situation with the bookkeeping. See, once again, they were, and this is where I think the Democrats, and especially the Biden administration, has made a horrendous miscalculation here in the fact that they're thinking they can essentially, triumph over Trump by all this crazy, weird legal action, where, guess what? They're dealing with Donald Trump, who once again has spent many dollars, thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars on attorneys fighting back when people come after him. Oh, and this whole thing with, and if you read one of the opinions, who was it? Which one of the justices wrote and this is the interesting little underlying fact.
Is it Roberts? Roberts wrote the majority opinion,
No. There was Clarence Thomas wrote the little thing on the fact that Jack Smith was not even appropriately put in that position. In other words, this is you know what I'm talking about? There's a claim that the special counsel, there's a definition of how the special counsel is supposed to be appointed, and there have been people for months who have said, hey, hold on a minute. Now, Jack Smith was not appointed properly. He shouldn't be the special counsel and all this stuff he's doing. And that came out in this decision yesterday. But the point being is, if it weren't for the fact that they're trying to throw Trump in jail, the Democrats, specifically the Biden people, are trying to throw Trump in jail, Trump would have never gone to the Supreme Court to appeal this whole crazy thing and this whole crazy judgment that came out of it, which the Democrats are now saying, well, he's trying to make himself a king. I mean, see, I can see both sides of this issue, but once again, the Democrats have caused this problem because of the fact that if Biden, let's say Biden doesn't run for re-election, he drops out, okay, and on January 22nd of next year, the Republicans go after him. Oh, look at all the things he did when he was in office.
You're absolutely right.
I mean,
and not to interrupt, Brad, but I think that's been Will Scharf's point all along in every interview.
Right, essentially.
You could look at Barack Obama the same way. You could look at every president.
Exactly. They've opened up Pandora's box. And I don't think it's a situation of being made a king. I think it's a situation that if you have that position of power, and, conceivably the most powerful person in the United States, and some people would say the world, but I don't necessarily agree with that anymore. I think we've become, and I hate to say this, I don't think we're the most powerful nation in the country, in the world anymore. And it pains me to say that, but and for a number of reasons. But that's the problem you run into, is that if you have somebody who has to second guess themselves, well, if I make this decision, when I get out of office, they're going to come after me, that's what the Democrats have essentially done this to themselves. I mean, once again, and the idea being is they're talking about retribution, okay? The Democrats are saying, well, Trump's going to get in office and retribution. Well, guess what? If you wouldn't have come after him, he probably wouldn't have had that thought in his mind, right?
You're exactly right, yeah.
And if you just, it's like human nature 101. If you walk up to somebody on the street and you say, hey, good morning, and then you punch them in the face, you can expect one of two things. Either they're going to run away, or they're going to say, I'm a karate master, and they're going to put you in your place, and you're going to be on the sidewalk, bleeding from multiple places, if you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly well, now in St. Louis City, there's a cop on every street corner, Brad. So I doubt you would actually get punched in the city. But maybe in Cottleville, I don't know, maybe in St. Albans, you might get punched in the face. But your point is taken, Brad.
By the way, talking about sad, this story that came out over the weekend of this guy getting shot at his wedding reception?
I know. Yeah. Now, remind me, that was in Town and Country, right?
No, it was in the city. I mean, it's this bizarre, weird story about this couple. Apparently, they've been living together for a long time. They got 2 kids and the whole bit. And they got married in their backyard. Wasn't that the deal? And
Yeah. And they were Hispanic, right?
Right. And during the wedding reception, 2 dudes, dressed like ninjas, come in to try to rob everybody. And the one guy shoots the groom in the head and kills him. Or no, I don't think
he's seriously injured, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, what in the world? And what people? Oh, it's lack of gun control. Okay, here's the problem. Dig out your world history things and see what's happened in England. Okay. They've made it almost impossible for anybody to get a gun. I mean, it's almost impossible for an average citizen to get a gun. So what's the problem they have in England? You know what the problem they have in England right now, especially in London? You know what it is?
Besides Dole food, I have no idea.
Everybody's getting stabbed to death.
Yeah, you're right. I have seen that. Right. And they've dealt with a lot of they've had the joy of immigration too, right? Like they've dealt with a lot of newcomers and assimilators, who for some reason haven't exactly assimilated to civilized culture. Like, who could have seen that coming?
We talked about this yesterday. That's why you have all these interesting political rifts going on in Europe, because of the fact that the people are tired of the green energy crap. They're tired of the immigration thing, and they're going like, okay, we got these leaders who tell us, oh, the reason you're paying twice as much for this is because we have to go green. Remember we had the story yesterday was Denmark. They're gonna tax the farmers for cattle flatulence. I'm going, okay, this is getting a little bit out of control, And the crazy thing about it is that who's the big polluters in the world right now? Who's the two big countries that are polluting the most? You know what the answer to that question is?
Greta Thunberg taking long-distance flights, and China.
Well, it's China and India. And guess what? Most of these climate accords don't really call out. I mean, what's the story I read that here we're Ameren UE's talking about we're getting rid of our Rush Island plant and we're going to have all renewable energy by 2040. And here China's putting a new coal-fired power plant online every month. Some crazy story like that.
Yeah, I feel like Missouri governor candidates should run more ads about China. I feel like that's the one issue that they haven't tackled in their campaigns.
Well, you know what? And you know what Bill Eigel would say about that?
What would he say?
Washington calls us backwards. They look down on us. Well, Washington can get bent.
I can't hear it on my end because, I can't hear things that you play. But I bet he's telling people to get bent.
You're right. We have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?